Hello. Hello. So I have written, or I'm in the process of writing the book. It's almost complete. And so this talk today is going to be pulled from aspects of the book. And I wanted to share with you my journey. So I grew up on a farm in western Kansas. On that farm, I had some ducks. The closest town, I would say, it deserves a blink as you pass through it. So it kind of gives you a scenario of where I grew up. It was not about living outside the boundaries. It was not about doing anything that wasn't conforming to societal norms. I watched my parents both conform constantly. My dad was bitter and angry, and he was frustrated. Why? Because he did not do what he wanted to do. He listened to the demands of his father. We lived on the farm, but my grandfather owned that farm, and he spent his life pretty much controlling our lives. And my father let that happen because he didn't have the courage or the voice to be able to go outside this conformity and do what he wanted to do. My mother was very frustrated, angry, bitter, and held a lot of resentment towards my father because she wanted him to exercise his voice, but he did not have the strength, the courage, or the willpower to do so. She too was a conformist. She never used her voice. She never explained what she wanted or needed. They both followed the conformity of their parents. They had a path laid in front of them of which they followed, and I watched them struggle to make their life happy. They didn't know how to do that. They just knew that they needed to do whatever their father and their mother and the people around them did. 3 months after my parents had met, they got married. I grew up believing in fairy tales. I believed that those fairy tales started with looking for your prince and then rescuing the damsel in distress. I didn't want a prince. I wanted a princess. But I didn't want the damsel. I didn't want to be rescued. I wanted to rescue myself. It takes a lot of courage to step outside your box, your comfort zone, whatever makes you happy, because we're all too familiar with the things that keep us comfortable. And if you don't do what makes you happy, you're constantly going to be just living to live and to survive. You are not going to know what it's like to live outside that comfort zone until you take a step. And every step you take is a little bit closer to where you want to be. But how can you get there if you're afraid? Only thing you can do is set yourself on an island, whatever island that is, whatever thing that you want to do, and take a step. If you're afraid of the water, you're not going to just jump in. You've got to visualize the water. You've got to take a step towards the water. You've got to be in that place where you can take every little step you take is like a tick mark. It's a tally mark. And on those tally marks, it proves that you did it, you succeeded, and you can make another one. And the more times you practice, the better you'll get, and it won't be near as complicated or as hard as you might think. It's like flying and wanting to parachute out of an airplane. The fear is getting in the airplane, because once you're up in the air, you're not really scared until you've been shoved out the door. And then after you've been out the door and you're in the air, it's like all you can think about is where you are at this moment. I had a friend of mine who was, at the age of 5, was taken up to the Statue of Liberty. And his father hung him out over the top like this. The child was terrified of heights every day after that. The only way he could get past his fear is he chose to go skydiving. When he jumped out of the plane, he envisioned that the ground was coming up to meet him and not him meeting the ground. He said it was exhilarating. To tie this back into sex and sexuality, I didn't have an orgasm until I was 28 years old. I didn't even know what one was. I just know that people said, "Did you have an orgasm?" I know that it wasn't until I was with a woman that I experienced an orgasm. And then I said to myself, with the person I was with, no wonder men like women. Now I get it. I grew up, I'm pretty much going to tie in everything everyone has said, because I grew up in a Catholic family. And I have more guilt than anybody's car or house or even the land in which they live on have room for. I have spent my lifetime trying to get rid of the guilt for different reasons, of which I got a divorce. When my kids, I met my prince at 14. I got married at 19. I had 3 kids, and at the time when a woman entered my life and said, "You cannot constantly be living on the fence," because where I wanted to be in my life at the time was over here. But I was living on old belief systems, that I had to be here. It was my duty. It was my obligation. I lived in constant fear. I needed to check out of that and build a life not based in fear, obligation, duty, or guilt. That took a lot of steps. And I remember the day I said I want a divorce, and my husband looked at me and says, "Please don't leave. I don't care what you do, just don't leave." It was one of the hardest things I ever had to deal with. And then, looking at my kids, it was hard. But I don't have any regret moving forward, because where I've been, where I've been doing is I've been living my truth. And the truth is what sets you free. And I wanted to be a role model for my kids. Because if I would have stayed, those kids would have not learned anything except to constantly conform. And it makes people live a life they weren't meant to live. In order for you to live a life you're meant to live, you have to stand in your truth, in your true essence. And how do you find that? Open your mind and your heart up to all possibilities and see what comes your way. When you have your island set out there, no matter what that is, and you're in your boat and you're rowing along and you're pushing against the current, why are you pushing? Everything happens more freely when you let go. I'm going to give you an example. So when I wanted to write this book, I had a lot of resistance because I was dumping a lot of stuff, or getting in and digging through a lot of stuff and getting it out so that I could write the book. I was sitting at the desk and I knew I was really struggling with being able to get anything on paper. Nothing was coming. That's the first cue. Back to listen to your intuition. You need to move forward. You got to get up and do something different. So I got up, I grabbed my bike, I grabbed my notepad, and I said, you know what? Find me a place where it's quiet, it's comfortable. I want to be right up next to the ocean. I want it to be a place where I can sit down, because I don't want to be laying in the grass. I don't want to get too comfortable, because then I won't do what I'm doing. Want to be doing. And as I round the corner, right there in front of me was a narrow street covered in those moss-covered trees. It was freaking beautiful. And to the left was the ocean. And it butted up against an embankment, a wall. And just to the other side of that was a mound of grass. There wasn't just not just one bench. There was 4 benches. And I was like, wow, could this get any better than this? This is exactly what I asked for. I didn't have to push, I didn't have to shove, and I didn't have to work to get there. I did what I was going to do, which I sat down and write. When I got finished, I got up and went around the bend, and on the front side of the houses, I was riding, like I said, I was on my bicycle, And I looked down at the ground, and as my wheel ran over it, it was graffiti in chalk that said, "I told you so." We don't have to work, we don't have to push at anything. Nothing. Against what my father had taught me. It's like the only way you're going to get anywhere is you got to follow the rules, you got to work really hard, and you don't ask questions, and you don't buck conformity. That's all I ever knew how to do. So I pushed my way through life. I went and I got married because that was what I was supposed to do. I'm not saying he wasn't a great guy. Today we have the best relationship ever. I tell him I love him, he tells me he loves me, and we have a fabulous relationship. Don't ever let anyone tell you you can't be or do or have whatever you want, because you can. And when you live in your true essence, you are living fully aware, fully awake, and fully alive. And then you can give your gifts to anyone and everyone. Because you're not doing it out of duty, obligation, fear, or guilt. And that is where you can have a really great orgasm. Because you're doing it on purpose. And you're not doing it for any other reason. And that is the best I can't say the best because that is orgasm. But to be able to have an orgasm like that is coming from when you challenged your fears. Try it once. Live your life. Love your life with passion.